Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this BEC meeting, and thank you, Minister, for coming in and agreeing to talk to us. First of all, Minister, I'd like to say how pleased we are in the energy sector that you've retained the energy portfolio and that you've added transport to it to bring these two important and closely related subjects together. And I think from the work that Mike's team has been doing, they're going to become even more closely related. It's also quite opportune that you're speaking this week because Monday or yesterday, because we're a day ahead of the rest of the world in Washington, the WEC launched its Energy Trilemma 2014. And the good news from that is that New Zealand has retained its top 10 rating in maintaining the energy trilemma of energy security, energy equity and environmental sustainability. And I think we should congratulate ourselves on this, but not be complacent about it. Another thing that the WEC highlights in its trilemma launch is that there is going to be some 20 trillion investment required in energy infrastructure over the next 20 years. Globally, of course, not in New Zealand. But I think this highlights that energy will retain a critical area for balanced action by government, by business, and by the whole community. And so it's going to continue to be a subject which maintains a high and important profile in our lives. And I think what we're needing to consider is some good long-term planning by government and business. As we set out in the energy briefing last month, which there are copies available, if you would like to have them, or if you haven't seen them, you can get them from John. And also, before you start, Minister, I'd like to mention that the Business New Zealand Energy Council is launching its BEC 2050s project. And this is taking the work the World Energy Council did with energy scenarios and saying, well, if we get a JAS, a trade and consumer-led energy future, or if we get a symphony, a government and a government-led future and voter-led future, perhaps where we do get some global agreement on climate change in the next 5 years, what will these two different and realistic scenarios mean for New Zealand, and how will we cope with that? And so what BEC is wanting to do is to give us some long-term thinking about how New Zealand approaches the energy future. And so that's a project that's in action now, and hopefully by around about July next year we'll be releasing that. So with that, Minister, thank you for coming, and we look forward to your contributions. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Rob. I don't know if most of you heard John Carnegie's ducks ring there. He just said that's the personalised ring he has for his wife, which I think is terrible, John, that you would think of your wife in that way. But look, it's just great to be here, and a privilege really start of a new term to sort of share some thoughts and get your sense of it all as well. And to do so with, leaders in the field of environment, sustainability, energy, who actually, in a way, with this government are in partnership, because we're not like the left. We don't want to do things to you. We actually think that there's a lot of opportunity in these areas, and that you can be a part of those. And yep, there's challenges, but I think also done well. There's money to be made from some significant issues that the world has, and we're in a window really at the moment. We know that climate change is being taken more seriously, so it's moving up the agenda. We also know that, probably for the first time actually, the likes of China and the US and other large countries are talking really seriously about energy efficiency and some of these issues and how to grapple with them. And it seems to me that's a real comparative advantage that New Zealand has in these areas, and we have an opportunity that we can make something of. Can I just thank you, Catherine, and Contact for putting this on, and also the New Zealand Business Energy Council. I really appreciated your briefing on coming back into office. I'm looking forward to your energy scenarios project, and the work you're doing there I think will be very helpful for government. I know you just want me to touch on the World Energy Council's trilemma and the work they're doing. I think, as you've said, Rob, it's good that we're, in the last day or so, confirmed is still in the top 10, if only just. Of course, we'd prefer to be sort of 6, 5 or 1 or 2. But I think it does speak fundamentally about the strong system that we do have in energy and electricity. And we're not, I think, to take your point, complacent. And there will be, I think, a series of improvements this year. The Electricity Authority, the gas industry company, and others will be involved in to make sure that we stay competitive, we stay strong. But I think, for those of you, you get 2 or 3 minutes on RNZ with Guy, but yesterday morning, talking about some of these issues very briefly, fundamentally I'd say to you we do have a strong system. In terms of sustainability for the year June to June 2014, it's 79% renewables, so it's rising. And I think we'll continue to sort of see that trajectory slowly but surely. I think in terms of security, again, it's very, very good. We've got a diversity of renewables starting to happen there. It's not all hydro, which would cause us problems, but there's a series of different kinds of renewables. And I think without at all preempting the work that Carl and the Electricity Authority are doing on the power outage earlier this year in Auckland, and we'll get a sense from that, just how, I suppose, serious, for lack of a better word, systemic the issues there are or aren't, as the case may be. What I certainly can say is that the significant investment in infrastructure by the lines and transmission company in that area quite clearly meant, and I'm talking Nan and the other one that starts with N that I can't think of, that clearly meant that we didn't have a much larger outage that included all of the CBD, right? And then we would have made world headlines, actually, but we didn't. And that's not to be complacent, that's not to be glib to the 85,000, I think it was, customers who lost power, and I'm sure were very seriously inconvenienced. But, fundamentally, I think if you look at security, the investment in that area and throughout New Zealand has made a difference. The focus really, as I understand it, of WEC's report perhaps is around affordability. And, what I'd say to you there is, we've had, again, the year, I think June or July, is it to July, a 2% increase in power prices. But again, what's all important is looking at how that's made up. And, it has been made up in the significantly, I think, 5.9% increase in the lines, the transmission and the regulated component as they do invest in our infrastructure. And, I think probably rightly so, the competitive part, the part Contact and some of you others, Mighty River Power knows here and 1 or 2 others are in, is in fact declining. And that's exactly what we'd want to see, I think, in a competitive market. Where the answer is, as Carl's told me, and I think the EA's BIM, more retailers, more brands than ever before. The answer is to shop around. And, I've been doing a bit of that lately, and it's making a difference to my own household budget. And so, I think that's where things are at there. The other one that, of course, comes up, and I just want to thank the industry for being responsible, and I think responsive on this being in relation to disconnections. And we didn't make much of it. In fact, we didn't even put a press release out because it wasn't the approach we wanted to take. But we now have disconnection rates that are, I think, 0.3% of connected households, lowest since 2009. And I just say to industry, good on you, and that's good. It shows actually that industry can take leadership and doesn't need the stick of government, if you like. Keep at it, and don't slip, because it will be one that people watch, including me. I really just wanted to talk today That wasn't a stick. That was kind words of encouragement. There's a difference. I really just wanted to talk today about something I've talked about before, not so much the transition to a lower carbon economy, but climate change, I suppose, specifically, and vis-a-vis the portfolios that I have. Because, look, I've got fantastic portfolios. I personally think best portfolios in government, energy and transport, because they're ones that are really doing stuff and that make a difference to New Zealanders on a daily basis. They're not sort of, although they have their sort of, I suppose, challenges, but they're not ethereal kind of ones that people can't grasp. They're real. Their roads, their rail, their cycles, their electricity that turns lights on, and energy efficiency. And so they're great portfolios that really make a difference. And I suppose there's probably other themes, but certainly a unifying theme across those portfolios, and including, of course, associate climate change. It's a bit of a stretch to take it to associate justice, but is climate change. And you just see that very clearly if you look at where our emissions come from as a country. It was at 47-48% from agriculture, and we can all have views on that, but fundamentally, when you're the most efficient dairy producers in the world, getting food to overseas markets, it doesn't make sense to decrease what you're doing in that area. And my personal view is we will, it's not a linear thing, we will find, through technology disruption, a solution to some of those issues. But that the answer isn't to somehow do less or ruin what is an important industry for New Zealand. But then you look at the other half, and what is it? I think 44% is in energy. Of that, about 19%, so just about half, is in transport. And so it just shows you, I think, quite clearly that the portfolios and the sectors that most of us here are in are important to these issues, that there is some, use a hackneyed phrase, low-hanging fruit probably that we can do something about. And I think also an increasing theme in government, the desirability of a cross-portfolio approach. That came through very clearly in the first, I think it is, briefing from all state sector heads, chief executives to government, that they want to see us tackle complex issues, not in isolation, but actually operate with their words, collective impact. And I agree with that. I think that's right. And climate change is definitely a complex issue. We're not going to solve it overnight, that's for sure. But over time we can make real progress. And that probably means, and Tim Grosser and I certainly have this approach that's far from siloed, getting officials from the different areas. And on occasion actually, and John knows this, industry and business as well into the room, because all ideas help, and the collaboration is the word I've used already, the partnership makes a difference. And it seems to me, and I'm no scholar at all on these things, but that there are there's a number of ways you can make a difference in climate change. You can make a difference through a price mechanism. And New Zealand does that. In fact, we have a comprehensive ETS. It gets a bad rap from the left, but actually it is the only comprehensive ETS outside of the EU and I think it's Kazakhstan that has a comprehensive all emissions climate change. What is true is a bit like a car, the engine isn't particularly running fast, and that is a result of a world economy that hasn't been a good place, a low international carbon price. But I don't think we say it's going to stay that way. And so I think we do have there a strong ETS, but we've always said we'll do our fair share there whilst remaining competitive. And so we're not going to punish business for no reason if it's not going to take the agriculture example, make a difference, and risk businesses moving offshore because we are uncompetitive. I think the other, obvious one is through international negotiations, and again, contrary perhaps to some of the left's assertions, New Zealand really does play a strong role, in fact a leadership role in that area, quite often where we've got comparative advantage. I've already said to you, I think what's obvious about that right now, this issue is moving up the agenda worldwide. You saw that with President Obama in Australia, you've seen it with the US-China deal, I suppose, and some of the things they're saying. And we know that as Paris comes closer, the Conference of the Parties there in 2015, the end of that year, these things will come into sharp relief. But we do in the Global Research Alliance on Agriculture put a lot of money in and show real leadership around some of those emissions issues, whilst trying to feed a hungry world. Fossil fuel subsidy reform, I'm not going into the detail of these things, play a really strong role. And if you don't believe me, just take the US's climate envoy, Todd Stern, in the recent speech he gave. He made quite clear, actually, that he appreciates the very innovative, clever way that New Zealand approaches these things, and what our, from our negotiators and officials up to the Minister, Tim Grosser, do in this area. We are having an impact. But one of the things that I suppose is increasingly, if you like, dawning on me is that, a price mechanism, international negotiations are important, but it's also what we do in a real sense. And I looked straight at Mike and some of the things that we're doing in ECA, but also that you can do in business that makes a difference and counts actually internationally in this area. And we know in public statements from President Xi of China that energy efficiency is something he's very interested in working with New Zealand on, and we'll see that in other areas in this energy sector. So, we do a lot already. I think real, it's the phrase of the day, but real stuff. We are doing stuff in this area. The ECA programs I mentioned, but I'm really proud of them. They're very small, $5 million or thereabouts, in sort of what we'd call complementary measures, whether it's energy efficient tyres, connecting up woody biomass waste with businesses in Southland, new hub there. The meat and dairy plant work, with consultants going and tuning up boilers potentially where it works and makes sense economically, looking at transferring them across to bioenergy, and the heavy vehicle fuel efficiency program we're running out on the ground for the heavy fleet of big businesses. They are programs that, albeit small dollars, make a difference. And really they're a signal of intent, actually, as we see how they work, of the sort of things we're not doing things to business, but business is involved where we're in a partnership of collaboration to make a difference economically, efficiency-wise, but also in carbon emissions terms. We've got a forestation scheme we announced before the election, again, not a large one, it's $25 million, I think it is, to seed planting in, I think primarily the East Coast, but other parts of New Zealand. We spend, you probably don't know this, we spend about $100 million as a country on getting, well, you probably do actually in this room, but on getting renewable energy into the Pacific. I was just reading, I think on Energy News, about yesterday, one I didn't sort of know so much about in Tonga, businesses putting, I think it was wind, wasn't it, into Tonga. I mean, Tuvalu and some of these other countries where we've taken them from 100% diesel to 100% renewables. Solar where it works, sometimes wind, and that's a pretty phenomenal contribution we're making actually as a country that we should be proud of. but probably isn't talked enough about. You know, science projects through the various Callaghan Institutes and other outfits out there. But, you know, the question I sort of ask is, well, what more? What more can we do? And how can we sort of all work together to have a bit of an agenda in this area that's making a real difference without subsidies, because we don't need them, without those sort of things, but that actually we're, through smart thinking, we're making a difference. And, you know, as I said to some of you before we got up, you know, I don't have conclusions on this just yet. I do want to mention, because I think it's you know, very interesting, because it is you know, cross portfolios, energy and transport, but some of the great things I think I'm seeing in electric vehicles. And not everyone's convinced, but look, I know Mighty River Power's here just to celebrate what they are doing, turning their fleet EV, at least I think about 70% by the end of 2016. And you know, the story there is very interesting, actually, because if you go to sort of 2000, zero EVs and plug-in hybrids, I think at the middle of this year, MFE's advice is really about 250. And again, I think it was MFE advice, they're saying we'll be at around 500 by the end of this year. So you can see just there, very small, but that curve is rising. And I would love to see that in the thousands over coming years. And you know, really what I'd say is, absolute for you, it's got to make economic sense. But as you go back and talk to your, you know, chief executives, think about this. We have 200,000 new cars enter our fleet every year. Of those 200,000, somewhere between 60 and 80% of them are purchased by corporate fleets. So your businesses purchase nearly all of them. Private individuals like us in this room purchase basically none of them. I think it's 14%. Don't ask me what the other 6% is. That's sort of Martians or something. That's probably John Carnegie's cell phone ring. So there you have it. And you know, we are seeing the price of those vehicles going down. Certainly in a fuel sense, Mike could tell you, but the electricity versus you know, conventional petrol fuel makes sense over a period of time. And
26 cents a litre.
There you go. And what Fraser Winteray says is that you know, you sort of look at this. What are some of the issues? Well, there's a sort of a mindset issue. What about resale? Well, I think that you can get over that. And I think then there's sort of other ones. Well, what about, you know, I can't travel to Waimakakuku and sort of 150 k's away. Well, how often do you do that, really? The average New Zealander travels, on average, I think it's 30 k's a day. And EVs can do a whole lot more than that. So it's just worth thinking about. And without sort of waxing too lyrical on this for too long, because you'll all think I'm a weirdo, you know, wouldn't it be amazing, actually, as part of New Zealand's brand, where EVs, we could say we had one of the highest uptakes in the world. I think at the moment it's Norway, and where that became part of our brand. Because frankly, what would that be saying? Well, it would be saying that renewables is part of our brand. And it should be, because I don't know, what do people think of when they think of New Zealand? They probably think lots of things. They think about our dairy industry. They think about tourism. But actually, it seems to me one of the really strong comparative advantages we have that isn't talked enough is that strong energy system of renewables, and EVs would be really playing into our strengths in that area. I'm interested in international opportunities in energy for New Zealand. I've talked many times about petroleum and the resources side, and there's no shying away from that this term. I think there's a continuity there in our policy settings, and we want to retain momentum in that area. But I also think, and just how and the recipe, if you like, I haven't got clear. But I also think there is a lot more untapped potential in the expertise we have in renewables and electricity and smart grids. And give you an example, there's a Geothermal World Congress coming to Australasia next year. I think it's in May 2015 in Melbourne. And it's a real opportunity for us as a country and as a sector to do something, because as I said to you before, I think there is a window on these things where the Chinas, Americas, probably the Brazils, Indonesias will increasingly start thinking about this. And I think already we are leaders, certainly in geothermal, but in some other areas as well. And it's something where I think we could step up. So, look, great to be here. Those are some preliminary thoughts. I probably gone too long, but very happy to sort of take some questions, hear your thoughts in the remaining few minutes.
Hi Simon, Ewan Gebby from the Energy Management Association. I think it's fantastic you're looking at international opportunities in renewable energy. Would you consider widening that scope a little to consider the energy services sector? Because I also believe we've got some amazing expertise in energy management and energy auditing and those sorts of areas, and some of our energy management software providers are New Zealand based and doing wonderful things engaging with the electricity system. So would you...
Yes, and I think potentially for the industry, some of the more realistic options are probably in those ones that don't require a lot of capital overseas, but are about expertise. And but be clear, I'm not sort of. This is already happening. We know. I think Vector's doing some big deals in smart meters into Australia. Some of the power companies have also got in the generation, US and California and Australia, and I think Trust Power's case, for example, where they South Australia. So we are doing these things. I just have a sense that there's just a bit more potential in this, and also it, as I say, buys into, I think, a very strong part of New Zealand's brand that we don't do enough about or talk enough about, because we should be really proud in this room about what we are and what our system and our the way we use our resources in this country. But to answer your question, yes, absolutely. You always ask hard ones, Rob. I like ones like Ewan's, which are kind of...
Okay, so here comes the hard one. We undertake...
I don't have a degree in engineering. I can't tell you about carbon sequestration or...
I wouldn't mention that. But when we did our energy issues survey earlier in the year, basically what keeps energy executives awake at night and what's the need for action, I think there was a grouping of 3 or 4 things which you've already mentioned today. Electricity, smart grids, energy storage, and innovative regulations and thinking. If we bring together sort of leadership in these areas, which I think you've said is one of the things we could do, particularly in some of them, we could get to create a sort of perfect storm for a new paradigm in energy.
Yeah.
I hope that's not too difficult. Perhaps it's an open-ended question which you might like to comment on.
Look, it's possible. I suppose I'm slightly more timid than saying new paradigm. I think it was incremental steps that get us somewhere. I want to say very clear, this is not just about government. I think you guys and girls in this room and the businesses you represent also need to show leadership. I mean, I've thrown you, if you like, a sort of a soft challenge on the EV stuff. Think about. I mean, there's many other areas, but it's a genuine. It's not a government that's on the whole going to do things to you. We as right at the start, we see opportunities, not so much just the challenges. But yeah, I mean, I just think there's a I've got a sense of an opportunity in this area that's missing, and it's not just actually, and this is not perhaps so much interest through, but it's not just commercial. I already mentioned that series of projects that Murray McCulley's leading through MFAT. Well, I think there's quite a sort of a rounded, holistic picture here. What about, for example, the idea of someone from some of your companies perhaps doing a stint, what do we call those things when you do go and do a secondment with MFAT when they're doing some of these things. They're probably mutual benefits for both sides. And, you know, it very much is something that, you know, as we have leadership on the United Nations Security Council, it really allows us to do something really positive.
Sorry, a long way back. Sam Bridgman from New Zealand Post. It was encouraging to hear your enthusiasm over the electric vehicles, and you mentioned Norway, and I understand Norway is one of the leaders, but they do subsidise or incentivise electric vehicles into their country. Can you see, given the advantages, the government getting further involved in incentivising electric vehicles more than they are, or especially for the corporate fleets?
Well, you know, it's always context specific. In the context of $1 trillion oil fund, subsidies are realistic and appropriate. That's not where we're at, and so no, I don't need to be those as subsidies. I think in terms of incentives, use that word very loosely. If you look at it right now, for example, there is no ruck on EVs to 2020. I think there are some things that are possible that don't involve money that could at the margins have effect. But I'd come back to it, you know, if you look at what Mighty River did, I think, yep, they are in a sense playing to their brand strengths potentially, and there's some of those sort of softer sides. But I think it also stacked up economically for them. And there are other companies where it makes sense, doesn't require a subsidy. And really all I'd say is increasingly that will be so as the price and the technology comes down. And you know, right at the moment we're not helped, I suppose, by a relatively low petrol price. But you know, I can certainly tax it higher and make that more different. You don't write that down, Gareth. That wasn't I'm not sending a signal to the market. Yeah.
Hi, John Hancock. I think I'm wearing my Smart Grid Forum hat for this question, but it's building on the electric vehicle conversation. We've talked a lot in the Smart Grid Forum about electric vehicles and the connection that we're talking about here, but also about subsidies and distortions and how undesirable they are. But as you say, new vehicles are very fleet dominated, and probably the largest vehicle fleet in the country is the government's vehicle fleet. Did you have any thoughts about whether the government could do something to sort of help introduce this industry to New Zealand without subsidies, without distortions, but as a way of getting the ball rolling?
Well, I think the answer is, look, if it makes economic sense, then yeah. And ECA has fed into the procurement documentation effectively for MB. And is that whole of government? Yes. On these things? Look, it's an entirely independent decision, so I don't want to insert myself in that. But you know, I'm not asking from industry anything more than I expect from or would see in government. But that's simply a rational look at these things without some of the mindset prejudices that say, oh no, look, that sounds a bit newfangled. And as I say, you look at those numbers, 0 to 250 to 500. I think without subsidies, without sort of a whole lot of rinky-dinky, quote, incentives, that number's going to go up anyway. I suppose your question is really, the government component, but across the whole sector, what could accelerate that, and at what level would it be worth it? Well, I don't know is probably the honest answer, but we think about these, and we are thinking about these things. Very good.
Any other questions?
Thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Before we draw to a close, Minister, we'll just get Nio from Fonterra to do a vote of thanks.
They've got a big fleet.
So I'm Nio from Fonterra, and I think what's really reassuring to hear in your comments, Minister, is the fact that you're drawing the dots between the different portfolios, because I think there can be a bit of an artificial distinction when you're in business. You know, Fonterra, for example, we've got a huge vehicle fleet, but also we're a major energy user, major gas user, but of course we've got quite a sizable stake in the agricultural sector as well. But, you know, we don't see things in isolation, and it's great to hear you talking about drawing together those dots. And I think that the work of the Sustainable Business Council, Penny, you know, you're helping business bring those ideas together, and I think hopefully those processes will help us feed in more effectively to government as they're developing their policies as well. Another thing you spoke about, Minister, that really hit home was you spoke quite a bit about partnership, and I think the ball is firmly in our court as in terms of both in terms of thought leadership and policy design. You know, government doesn't have a monopoly on good ideas, and I think that again, the work that John's doing and Penny are doing, they're helping to give us the opportunity, and they're creating the environment for us to get together and think about what could help the sector and what could help the economy, and giving the opportunity for us to come up with those policy ideas. So I think, as I say, the ball is in our court, and I think that we all need to rise to that challenge. But it's not just in terms of policy, it's also in terms of, as the Minister aptly put it, the stuff that we do. And so, you know, I'm sure that there are things that Fonterra could be thinking about that would help to demonstrate that leadership. And so, as I say, ball's firmly in our court, and I hope that we will all be rising to that challenge. So thank you, Minister, for joining us today, and thanks for hosting us. Cheers.